Welcome to the CF Roundtable webcast on working with CF. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for those of you who are watching this tape. This webcast was given on May 17th, 2023. I don't have any relationships to disclose related to this presentation. So for those of you who are not familiar with CF Roundtable is a magazine that is put out by people with CF, for people with CF, and it's free. You can subscribe at cfroundtable.com, and we have 4 issues a year. This is our most recent issue that is also available online, so you can opt to get the paper copy and access online, or just access online. Okay, so our upcoming special focus edition will be working with CF. So this webcast is appropriate. If you are interested in writing an article about your experience working with CF, either successes or problems with working with CF, or how you worked out problems, you can submit your article of 1,000 to 2,000 words in MS Word format to CF Roundtable at USACFA.org. And I think the deadline is June 15th. So we would love to have articles about working with CF, but we always will accept any article you want to write about living with CF. And so we welcome new writers, and if you have any questions, you can certainly send us an email and we can answer your questions. So nothing in this presentation is meant to be legal advice and is only informational. There's no assurance or guarantee of eligibility for Social Security benefits or positive outcome of a legal case regarding employment laws or protections. A person who may be eligible for Social Security benefits should not rely on this information, but should consult with a qualified attorney about their individual and unique situation. So my name is Beth Sufian, and I'm a partner in the law firm of Sufian and Passamano. I'm director of the CF Legal Information Hotline, which is in its 25th year. I'm also director of the CF Social Security Project, and I've been practicing law for 33 years. I have a wonderful staff that works with me at the Information Hotline and the CF Social Security Project. We have 2 amazing attorneys, James Passamano and Amy Sopchik, who are experts on protecting the rights of people with cystic fibrosis and assisting people who need Social Security benefits. And then we have 4 wonderful paralegals, Jordan Campbell, Carolina, I'm gonna forget people's names, Santos, Oscar, and Brenda. I'm making myself laugh, Sanchez. So when you call the hotline, you'll speak with an attorney, and our paralegals will assist with issues related to Social Security and benefits. So the CF Legal Information Hotline was established in 1998 and provides free and confidential information on the laws that protect people with CF. And it's operated by the law firm of Sufian and Passamano. We are funded by the CF Foundation, but we are not employees of the CF Foundation. We are grateful for the funding that CF Foundation gives us, which allows us to assist close to 1,000 people a month who have legal questions, and also not only people with CF, but family members and members of their CF care teams. So this is the email address, cflegal@sufianpassamano.com, or to contact us by phone, 1-800-622-0385. And if you are watching this live, the first 5 people who email cflegal@sufianpassamano.com who would like this beautiful CF Roundtable tote bag will get this very nice tote bag. Not this one. We have other tote bags that will be handled by someone who does not have CF, if you're concerned about that. All right, so we're going to talk about 2 kind of different areas related to work tonight. And one, we're going to talk, the first section of the presentation is going to be about being employed and what your rights are as a person with CF. And as a person with a disability. So we'll talk about 2 federal laws that provide the most protection for people with disabilities in work. And then we'll talk about how Social Security works for people that are receiving Social Security benefits and either want to work part-time or are working part-time. We'll talk about the different limits for working, and also we'll talk about some Social Security work incentive programs. So we're going to hope to do most of this within 30 minutes, which is rather quick. And then if you have questions, you can send an email to cflegal@sufianpassamano.com, and I can set up a time for you to talk with either myself or a lawyer. So if you do have questions, save them and let us know what they are, and we'll be happy to answer them. So accommodations in employment are available under 2 different federal laws. One is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is known in the short acronym ADA, and the ADA is applying for private employers. And then the second law is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And that law applies to federal contractors or any employer that receives federal funds. So ADA accommodations in employment are very important to people with CF who are working. We are having a dramatic increase in calls to our hotline with questions about protections in the work arena and questions about the ADA mainly. And I think that's because we do have a lot of people with CF who are going back to work or starting work for the first time and finding that they actually do need accommodations at work. And many of them are interested in how to go about asking for an accommodation under the ADA. And occasionally we hear from people who are working for the federal government or federal contractors who are interested in accommodations under Section 504. So in order to be protected by either law, the employer must be a qualified individual with a disability. So qualified is defined as someone who's able to perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation. So that's really important to know, that you have to be able to perform the essential functions with or without a reasonable accommodation. If there is no accommodation that can be given, then the person is not considered qualified for the job. Disability has a different definition than the Social Security definition. So that's really important. Lately, we've had a few CF care centers contact us to say that they have a patient who wants an accommodation, but that the person is not getting Social Security benefits. And so the CF center thought that that meant the person could not request a reasonable accommodation. So I think it's really important, especially if you're talking to your care center about providing you with information to request a reasonable accommodation, to make sure that the care center, that one time it was a doctor who called, one time it was a nurse, 2 times it was a social worker, so 4 times in the past month. Make sure they know that the definition of disability is different for the ADA. So for the ADA, you need to have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So for many people with CF, that would be breathing. For some people with CF, that might be digesting food or eating, which is where diabetes could come into play. So if you don't have a substantial limitation, then you could have a record of a disability and think that you are being discriminated against because of a record of being disabled, or being regarded as having a disability or being disabled. So if you are qualified and you have a disability, then you do have the right to a reasonable accommodation in employment. So the employer has no duty to provide an unreasonable, or in the law it says duly burdensome, accommodation. So an example would be of accommodations that people are asking for now. A lot of people are asking for remote work. So at the beginning of COVID-19, I would say for a solid year, we had calls about requesting the accommodation of remote work every day for probably a year and a half. I think now we have we're hearing about a lot of employers who allowed remote work, but are now saying they're no longer going to allow it. And so for those people with CF, they are asking for a accommodation. Even if they've asked for one before, it sounds like employers are now saying, we're not going to do that anymore. And so the person with CF is again having to fill out paperwork about an accommodation related to remote work. And that's remote work that you've already shown can be done remotely. To me, is not a difficult request for an accommodation. In the past, we always had employers saying it would be impossible for you to work remotely. And I think now, if you've already been working remotely for 2 or 3 years, that's very good evidence that the accommodation request to continue remote work is reasonable. Sometimes we have situations where people are employed and there is another person with CF employed in that same location. And so sometimes people are asking for cross-infection precautions as an accommodation. Some people need frequent restroom visits, and if people are only given like 2 breaks a day for 10 minutes each time, and you need to have more breaks to go to the bathroom, that would be another example of an accommodation. Rescheduling work for illness could be an accommodation, as long as you can perform the duty within the period of time the employer wants. So an example might be people have work and it's due by midnight, and the person asks for the ability to turn the work in closer to midnight than noon. And as long as that would allow the person to submit the work on a timely basis, that could be an accommodation. We have a few people who've asked for accommodations of being excused from outdoor activities, and a lot of times it's like a retreat for the job, or everybody goes out and plays basketball as a break midday. But if it's really hot or really cold, a person with CF or another disability could ask for an accommodation of not having to participate. Often it's like team building that the employer is trying to do. So that's kind of a very quick overview of reasonable accommodations. The reasonable accommodation request should be an interactive process. So sometimes we're hearing of employers who reject the request and they don't say why. And I think then it's a good idea to ask the employer to engage in what the law states specifically, the interactive process of trying to determine what accommodation is acceptable to the employer and will allow the employee to perform the essential functions of the job. If the reasonable accommodation is denied and there's not a way to get the employer to interact with the employee, the person would have 300 days to file a complaint with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. And that is free. You do not have to have a lawyer to file a complaint. Certainly you can call us at the CF Legal Information Hotline and we can give you more information on how that EEOC process works. The second law that can be very helpful for people with CF is the Family Medical Leave Act, also known as the FMLA. So the Family Medical Leave Act has a larger employee number for people who are covered by the FMLA. So ADA is 15 or more employees. Rehabilitation Act is, there's no limit on employees. It can be 1, it can be 100, it can be 1,000. But FMLA says there have to be 50 or more employees. Public employers are included, schools are included. So anyone who is at a covered employer will get the protection of the FMLA. So you do have to work for the employer at least 12 months. So often we hear about people and they're like in month 10 and they get sick and they're terminated because they've used up all of their sick time and they're not yet eligible for FMLA. So you do have to work at least 12 months before you become eligible for FMLA, and you have to have worked at least 1,250 hours during that past 12 months. And your location needs to have 50 employees, but it's within a 75-mile radius. So if there's lots of locations, that helps you to not have 50 employees at your specific location. So there are lots of different ways to qualify for FMLA. You can have the birth or placement of a child. You need to care for a spouse, a child, a parent, or your own serious health condition. So what are the benefits of FMLA leave? You get 12 work weeks of unpaid leave in a 12-month period. So for people with CF who sometimes have unpredictable absences and may have used up their sick time, let's say their sick time is 2 weeks and they've used that up, those people, if FMLA applies, can get 12 weeks of unpaid leave. And during that time, you cannot be terminated. So that's sort of like a safe harbor for people with CF who qualify for FMLA, or for parents who have a child with CF, or for a spouse who has a spouse with CF. So you're entitled to return to the same or substantially similar position if available at the end of the leave period. If the leave period ends, the 12 weeks ends, and you still cannot return to work, then you can be terminated. So if you are still unable to work, sometimes people try to request an accommodation of additional leave. It's kind of like half the time an employer will agree, half the time they won't. But often employers of 50 or more will have long-term disability, and that is a good option if you finish the FMLA leave. The other nice thing about FMLA is that you don't have to take all 12 weeks at once. So you could do a week, you could do another week, and it can be intermittent FMLA leave. So FMLA is really helpful. And if you'll see, kind of think about it, if the employer has to have 50 or more, if you do think that you may have time periods where you won't be able to work, or if you're a parent and you are taking care of either a child or an adult child, it is often good if you're looking for work to look for an employer with 50 or more employees. Yes, you have to work for 12 months before you're eligible for the leave, but once you've worked for 12 months, the FMLA gives you really strong protection from being terminated when you get sick. And we don't see employers ignoring the FMLA. We really see that if FMLA applies, employers give it to people, which is really nice because you don't have to worry if you're eligible for it. We don't ever see an employer saying you can't get FMLA leave if you're eligible, and you do have to provide documentation from your doctor. We really don't see a problem with people getting the FMLA leave. So there are states that have their own family medical leave, and you'll see here California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maine, Minnesota, a nice amount of states. And there's a few states that have paid FMLA leave. So if you live in that state, the family medical leave is paid, which of course is really nice. Okay, so those are the two main laws that are going to protect people in employment: the ADA, the Rehabilitation Act, and family medical leave. So sometimes people with CF find that working full-time and taking care of themselves often does not work out well. Even now, even when we do have people that are doing well, we still are hearing from a lot of people who are trying to work full-time and finding that it is difficult to both work full-time and maintain their health. And often what happens is the person gets sick and is not able to attend work, has not worked there a year, does not have FMLA leave, and a lot of people are being terminated from jobs when they get sick, and they're not eligible for FMLA. So for those people, an option is to apply for Social Security benefits and either not to work at all or to work part-time. That is a very good option for many people, even now in 2023. That seems to be a way for some people to work, but also have funds coming in for from Social Security so that they have enough time to rest, eat, do their treatments, take care of themselves, manage their diabetes, make sure they have their medicine, etc. And I think there's sometimes people who say they're ashamed if they have to do that, but I actually think that the most successful people, the people that I really admire, are people who are honest with themselves and say, I need to put my health first. And that means I can't successfully work full time. But the other thing is you could be on Social Security and also be going to school. You can be on Social Security and do volunteer work. So there's lots of options if you're on Social Security. And it is nice for many people to have a Social Security check that they get every month, no matter whether they're working or not. It's a very good cushion for a lot of people. You don't have to stay on disability forever. If someone today said to me, well, I guess once I get approved, I'll never be able to work. And I said, no, that's not true. You can work. First of all, you can work up to 20 hours a week. And in 2023, you can work up to $1,470 a month. And that's before taxes are taken out. If you're self-employed, you have a lower monthly earning amount, and that's $1,050. So that's just, there's a lot of reasons why Social Security has done that, but if you're self-employed, you have a lower amount that you can make. So there's another, so there's different types of Social Security. So you have SSDI, and then you have a benefit that is based on your parents' work record. And in order to get that, you have to have been held to be disabled by Social Security prior to turning the age of 22. And you have a parent that has died, is receiving disability themselves, or retired. There are increasing numbers of people with CF who have parents that are either deceased or retired, getting Social Security retirement. And those people can usually get a higher Social Security benefit if they haven't worked that much for the person with CF. And it's just known as Social Security based on a parent's work record. It doesn't have an acronym, unfortunately. But the nice thing is for that type of benefit, you don't have an asset limit, and you're usually getting a higher benefit than if you're on SSI, and you don't have a reduction of your check by the amount you work. So that is a good option for some people. So for SSI, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and SSDI, they use the same medical eligibility criteria, and you can find that at www.ssa.gov. That's where all different medical conditions are listed with the eligibility criteria for that condition. In addition, even if you don't meet the listed CF criteria or the listed depression criteria or the listed diabetes criteria, you can show you're as severe as the listed criteria. So we suggest calling the hotline so we can talk to you about the criteria if you're interested in applying for benefits. If you're having a medical review, we also suggest you contact us to see if we could assist you, and there's no charge for the assistance with Social Security applications or reviews, and that's thanks to generous funding from the CF Foundation. So can a beneficiary on Social Security return to work and retain their benefits? The answer is yes. But you do have to be aware that the goal of the work incentive programs are to return the beneficiary to work and to end their Social Security eligibility. So one of those programs is called Ticket to Work, and Ticket to Work is often a little tricky because you are saying that you think you can work full time. And Ticket to Work right now mainly provides people with a retail job or helps them get a job in fast food places or restaurants, which I think is quite hard work for a lot of people. And so I think people need to be careful when they're contacted by a Ticket to Work provider. They need to make sure they realize that when they enroll on the Ticket to Work, it often results in them losing their benefits, and they may not get the type of job they think that the program is going to provide. So we always say be cautious with Ticket to Work. So again, for Social Security disability, you can make up to $1,470 and work not more than 20 hours a week. We don't like when people go right up to 20 hours because if Social Security decides you could work a few minutes more, they could terminate the benefits. Also, sometimes people are working right up to 20, their boss asks them to work an extra 2 hours and then they're over. So we like people to work a little less than that. We understand sometimes people have to work right up to 20 because they need the money and they need the money for living expenses, but We like you to be a little below 20. Same with going right up to 1470. If you have a month that has a few more days, sometimes you end up going over the 1470. Social Security often finds that out many, many months in the future, and then you have something called an overpayment. So it is good to keep track of your earnings and your hours to make sure you're not going over the required limits. So trial work period is different than ticket to work. Ticket to work is where a private contractor hired by Social Security tries to help you find a job. Trial work is different. Trial work allows you to have up to 9 months where you can go over 1470 or over 1050 from self-employment. Now you'll see it says may, because they could decide in the 7th month that they think you are showing that you can work a lot and they could stop the benefit then. But often people will get 9 months as the trial work period. So the problem is that when you work over a lower number, so this year it's 1050, you use up a trial work month. So it sounds like when you look at the website, you only use up a trial work month when you work 1470. But if you work making 1050 in 2023, you use up one of your 9 months. So that kind of tricks a lot of people because they think I haven't gone over 1470, but they may have used up their 9 months. And then all of a sudden they work and make 2,000 and they lose their benefit because they've used up their 9 months. So it's very tricky, but the best thing to do is with the lower number, every time you go over that, you use up one of the 9 months. Once you've used up the 9 months, you can't go over the 1470. So if you use up the 9 months and you stay under 1470, you usually will stay on the benefit. So a lot of people try not to go over 1050 so that they don't use up their 9 months, and they save those for when they might be able to go over the higher number. But if you want, you can use up the 9 months, but then you have to stay right under that higher number. There is no trial work period if you're on SSI. So that also sometimes confuses people, but if you're on SSI, you don't get a trial work period. So the trial work period is automatic. You can't tell Social Security, don't count this as a trial work month. I want to save my trial work month. So when they see you go over the 1050 on the computer, it uses up that trial work month. So that's Social Security disability. So for Social Security disability, the important thing is stay under 1470, stay under a month, and under 20 hours a week. And then if you don't want to use up your trial work months, stay under 1050 in 2023. The other thing that we see, and of course, this is not a guarantee, but for many years, what we've seen is when people work below that 1050, they're much less likely to get a medical review. It's not a guarantee, but it does seem that people who work under the lower number don't get a medical review. If you meet the medical criteria, you are not too worried about getting a medical review. We do have funds to help with a medical review. We encourage you to call the hotline to see if we may be able to help you on the Social Security project. But for many people, they have a combination of issues related to CF that are making them unable to work more than 20 hours. And those people usually want to try to avoid a review. If they get a review, it's not the end of the world, but to try to stay sort of in the safe harbor of most likely not getting a review. I think for many people, that makes them less nervous. And I think that's often a good idea. So SSI is the other type of benefit that is given by Social Security. And that is for people who are below $2,000 in assets if they're an individual, or $3,000 for a couple, and they haven't worked enough to get Social Security disability, or their Social Security disability is less than the SSI amount in the state. So in most states, 914 is now the monthly SSI. And so if you have a Social Security check, Social Security disability of 300, you would get 614 of SSI, and you could be getting both money from both programs. So SSI has a lot of different rules. You can't have more than $2,000. You have to show you're able to pay your own rent. And when you work, for every $2 you earn, they reduce your check by $1. As long as you have $1, you keep your Medicaid. But it gets very confusing because Social Security doesn't really calculate your earnings until many months later. So a lot of people get an overpayment saying you owe us $400 because you made $800 last month. So for those people, looking into a work incentive program is a good idea. And it takes a little while to understand the different programs and to enroll in one, but we are finding that more people with CF are able to use these programs. And it's very helpful because, for example, this PASS program, it allows you to set aside money for a work goal. You have to come up with a plan. Social Security has to approve it. But when you're making money from work, your SSI check is not reduced, and you can save the money without worrying about your $2,000 asset limit. And so if you're on SSI, or if you know someone who's on SSI, it's really good for them to look into the PASS program. We have a few PASS clients who now are doing the PASS program, and it's really good because they're working, but they're still getting the full 914, and they're saving money for their work goal. So that could be setting up a business. It could be saving money to go to school. But what it does is you don't get a reduction from your work earnings. You still have to make sure you don't go over the 1470 maximum, and you can't go over the 20-hour maximum per week, but you get your full SSI check, and also you can save money and you don't have to worry about that $2,000 asset limit if you're single, or $3,000 if you're married. So another really good program for SSI is called 1619B. That program is intended to encourage Social Security beneficiaries who are on SSI to return to work, but allow them to retain Medicaid. So 1619B, if you enroll in it, means that you don't get your SSI check. So you don't get 914 a month, but you can make a much higher amount per month than the 1470. And then the real beauty, well, that's beautiful, but the really important thing is that if you become unable to work because of your health, it's the only time that you can have the benefit turned right back on. And there's not anything like that for SSDI. So before people jump off of benefits because they say they feel great, if they're on SSI, we really encourage them to talk to Social Security about being categorized as being under 1619B. And that's the section of the Social Security Act that provides for this kind of return to work and keeping Medicaid. So often Social Security offices say they've never heard of it, although it is on their website, but it's actually in the actual law, section 1619B of the Social Security Act. So eventually someone in the office will say, oh yeah, I've heard of that. But it's very helpful for people with CF who are on SSI and think that they can work making more than the 1470, but really want to keep Medicaid. So in addition to, that's a lot on 1619B, which we're not going to have time for. But in addition, for someone on Social Security disability, if you decide you want to get off of Social Security disability and you want to work, you can ask for continued Medicare eligibility. You have to do that before they terminate your benefit. So a lot of times people work over the allowable, eventually Social Security catches up to it and terminates the benefit. You can't then ask for Medicare continued eligibility. So we really encourage people, if you're thinking of going over the allowable for Social Security disability, and you've used up your trial work months before you're terminated, ask Social Security for continued Medicare eligibility. That way you can get Medicare for 8 years after you stop Social Security disability. If you don't ask for continued eligibility, they usually do not give that to you on their own. And so you lose the Medicare. And for some people, Medicare is really a good coverage to have. And in 2025, January of 2025, Medicare prescription drug coverage under Part D, which is where modulators, that's how they're paid for under Medicare Part D, is going to have a maximum $2,000 out of pocket a year of medication copays. So that's going to just be amazing and a dramatic change from the high copays Medicare Part D has right now. So before people jump off of Social Security, we think it's a good idea to ask for Medicare continued eligibility. So last, I'm just going to quickly talk about ABLE accounts. ABLE accounts were created in 2014, and they're considered to be a tax advantage savings account for individuals with disabilities. And you can put up to $15,000 in the ABLE account, and it won't be counted for purposes of the SSI asset limits or for Medicaid asset limits. So I'm sorry, now you can put up to 17,000. They just increased it by 2,000. So the most you can have that won't be counted is 100,000, but every year when you put more than 17,000 in 1 year, the extra amount does count towards that $2,000 SSI limit or the state Medicaid's limit. So you do have to have been found to be disabled prior to turning 26, but in January of 2026, that number is going to turn to be 46. So it's going to dramatically increase. And January 1st, 2026, if you were deemed disabled by Social Security prior to turning 46, you'll be able to set up an ABLE account, which protects that money from being counted for purposes of SSI asset limits or Medicaid limits. So, well, there we go. So that's speed dating of Social Security and work rules. But if you do have questions, please email us at cflegal@sufianpassamano.com. And again, if I'm not sure who's emailed, but if you would like this beautiful CF Roundtable tote bag, just email us and the first 5 people will get that. And then remember the CF Roundtable next issue, the article's focus topic is on working, and we would love to have articles from any of you. So thank you for joining, and have a good evening. Thank you.